For 12 long years, she carried a secret. A secret so heavy, it clipped the wings of the best pilot Top Gun ever trained. She walked away from the skies, from the roar of jet engines, from the very identity that once defined her. But fate has a way of calling us back, sometimes in the form of an SOS, and this time, it came from an F-22. What happens when the past you've tried to bury suddenly calls your name at 30,000 feet? Stay with me, because this is a story you will never forget. For 12 years, Rebecca Cole had been just another face in a small coastal town, the kind of place where people knew you as the woman who ran the little bookstore by the pier. She wore cardigans instead of flight suits, poured coffee instead of checking fuel gauges, and read stories about heroes instead of being one. To anyone who walked into her shop, she was calm, kind, and maybe even a little fragile, the type of person who seemed to have always lived a simple life. But what no one knew, what she worked desperately to keep hidden, was that Rebecca had once soared higher, faster, and braver than almost anyone alive. She wasn't just a pilot, she had been a Top Gun. One of the best. And her call sign, Falcon, had once struck awe in the skies. It was back then, in her 20s, when the Navy had picked her out as one of the most promising pilots of her generation. She flew with a kind of fierce grace, a blend of precision and instinct that couldn't be taught. She could read the air like a second language, feel turbulence before it hit, anticipate her enemy's move before they even thought of it. Her squadron had trusted her with their lives, and she had never once let them down, until the day she did. The memory haunted her more than anything else in her life. The mission had started like any other, a high-stakes training exercise over the Pacific, the kind that pushed pilots to their breaking points. She and her wingman, Daniels, call sign Hawk, had been paired together countless times before. They were not only colleagues but also friends, bound by late-night conversations on the flight deck and the kind of trust only forged when you've danced on the edge of death together. That day, however, something went wrong. A systems failure, a misread in the cockpit, or maybe just a cruel twist of fate. Rebecca never stopped replaying the what-ifs in her head. What if she had turned 1 second sooner? What if she had trusted her instincts instead of her instruments? By the time she corrected course, it was too late. Hawk's jet went down, flames carving a scar across the ocean's surface, and Rebecca's screams into the radio were drowned out by the silence that followed. Though the Navy investigation called it a tragic accident, Rebecca never forgave herself. She carried Hawk's face in her mind, his last words echoing in her ears, and the crushing weight that she had survived while he had not. She turned in her wings just weeks later, standing before the brass with her resignation letter trembling in her hand. They tried to stop her, she was too good, too valuable, too rare, but she couldn't bring herself to sit in that cockpit again. Not when her hands shook every time she touched the throttle, not when her heart twisted at the thought of hearing Hawk's laugh and realizing he would never be there again. And so, she disappeared. Still, the past had a way of slipping through the cracks. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could still hear the thunder of engines, the rush of wind as she broke the sound barrier, the sharp bark of her commander yelling over the radio. At night, she dreamed of skies, sometimes of flying free, sometimes of falling. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, gripping the sheets as if they were her control stick. And when the townspeople noticed her faraway look now and then, they simply assumed she was lonely, or tired, or lost in the stories she read so often. Rebecca tried to convince herself that this was enough. That a quiet life was what she deserved. After all, heroes didn't live in little towns, they lived in memories, in legends, in other people's stories. She told herself she wasn't Falcon anymore. She was just Rebecca, the woman who smiled politely at neighbors, who listened to the sea crash against the shore, who lived a life so ordinary it hurt. But the truth was, she missed it. She missed the skies with a hunger that never really went away. She missed the power of the jet trembling beneath her, the way the earth curved beneath her wings, the silence of being so high above that the world seemed small. She missed the bond with her squadron, the laughter after grueling drills, the quiet respect after missions completed. She missed Hawk, more than anything, she missed Hawk, and every time she saw the horizon at sunset, painted in streaks of fire and gold, she wondered what he would say if he knew she had quit. Would he have wanted her to keep flying? Or would he have told her that it was okay to stop? For 12 years, she asked herself those questions, and for 12 years, she never had an answer. She built a life that was safe, quiet, and carefully constructed, but it was also a life of hiding. Hiding from her past, from her grief, from the part of herself that still longed to soar. Then one evening, just as the sun slipped low and the shop closed for the night, Rebecca stood on the pier, gazing at the endless horizon. The sky above her roared faintly, and her heart clenched the way it always did when she heard jets on training runs from the nearby base. She tilted her head back, watching two faint streaks cut across the heavens, and whispered into the fading light, "I'm done flying. I'm done." She didn't know then how wrong she was. She didn't know that destiny wasn't finished with her, and that somewhere above, a pilot's SOS would soon shatter the silence she had so carefully built. The call came on a night that began like any other. Rebecca was closing the shutters of her little bookstore when she noticed the faint buzz of her old emergency pager, the one she had kept locked away in a drawer for 12 years. She had never thrown it out, perhaps because some small part of her couldn't let go of the world she once belonged to. The screen flickered faintly, and then came the 3 letters she thought she'd never see again, SOS. At first she thought it must have been a glitch, some outdated signal echoing from the past. But then her phone rang, an unfamiliar but unmistakably urgent military line. She froze, breath caught in her throat, before answering. On the other end, a trembling voice cut through the static. "This is Lieutenant Carter, F-22 Raptor, call sign Viper, engine failure, altitude critical, I'm losing her, anyone, please respond." The desperation in his voice pierced straight through her chest. Rebecca's hands shook as she gripped the phone tighter, the voice in her head screaming that this wasn't her fight anymore. She wasn't Falcon. She was just Rebecca, the woman who folded pages in books and smiled politely at strangers. But another voice, stronger, deeper, buried but never gone, thundered back at her, "You don't turn away from a pilot in distress. You don't ignore an SOS." That principle was written into her bones. She swallowed hard, her heart racing with a mix of fear and something she hadn't felt in years, purpose. Before she even realized what she was doing, she was in her old truck, speeding down the coastal road toward the nearby airbase, headlights cutting through the night. Her mind screamed at her, "What are you doing? You don't belong there anymore. They won't even let you in." But her hands gripped the steering wheel with a certainty she thought she had lost. At the gates, armed security stopped her, but the moment she gave her name, Rebecca Cole, former Top Gun. There was a pause, followed by a flurry of radios and hurried whispers. Within minutes, she was rushed inside. The base commander, gray-haired now but still sharp, looked at her as if he'd seen a ghost. "Falcon. We thought you were gone." She nodded once, steadying her breath. "I was. But you've got a pilot out there who won't make it unless someone talks him down. Let me." In the command center, the room was thick with tension. Screens lit up with radar, showing the flickering signal of the crippled F-22 spiraling over open water. Lieutenant Carter's voice cracked through the speakers, rising in panic as alarms screamed in his cockpit. "Altitude dropping fast, systems are fried, controls are sluggish, I can't," Rebecca cut in, her voice calm but commanding, a voice she hadn't heard from herself in 12 years. "Viper, this is Falcon. I've got you." The room went silent. Every head turned toward her. The young pilot's reply came back, confused and breathless, "Falcon. Wait, the Falcon. They told stories about you." "I can't," she interrupted firmly, "no time for that. Listen to me. You're not alone. We're going to bring you home." As she spoke, something inside her unlocked. The instincts returned as if they had never left. Every word she gave him, every calculation, Every command came with the precision of someone who had lived this 1,000 times before. Ease your throttle, trust the glide. Don't fight the jet, feel her weight. You've still got lift. Focus on the horizon, not the fear. Her voice cut through his panic like a blade, steadying his breathing, calming his hands. In that moment, Rebecca wasn't the broken woman who ran a bookstore. She was Falcon again. Still, the jet was in bad shape, and Carter's inexperience showed. He wavered, almost blacking out from the G-forces as he tried to keep control. Rebecca clenched her fists, her own memories flooding back, the day she lost Hawk, the helplessness of hearing his last words. Not again. Not this time. She leaned closer to the mic, her voice low but fierce. Viper, listen to me. I know what it feels like to think you're done, to think there's no way out. But I also know what it means to fight for one more second. One more breath. You're not going down today. Not on my watch. Do you understand me? His voice cracked, raw with fear but laced now with determination. Yes, ma'am. Copy that. The base scrambled rescue teams to prepare for a crash, but Rebecca wasn't ready to surrender him. With a mix of skill and relentless guidance, she walked him through the impossible, feathering the controls, shifting balance, and using what little power the jet still had. Slowly, agonizingly, the descent steadied. The radar showed the drop slowing, the spiral leveling. The room collectively held its breath. You've got this, she whispered, not just to him, but to herself as well. Bring her in. Minutes stretched into lifetimes, but finally, against every odd, the crippled F-22 scraped across the runway, skidding, sparks flying as metal screamed against concrete. Emergency crews rushed forward, but when the dust settled, the jet was battered yet intact. Lieutenant Carter stumbled out, shaken but alive. The command center erupted in cheers, but Rebecca felt her knees buckle with the release of a weight she had carried for 12 long years. She closed her eyes, tears spilling freely, and whispered Hawk's name. This time, she hadn't failed. Word spread quickly. To the younger pilots, Falcon was no longer just a legend whispered about in hangars, she was real, flesh and blood, and she had just saved one of their own. Carter found her later, eyes shining with gratitude. I owe you my life, he said, voice breaking. Rebecca shook her head softly. No, you owe it to yourself. You didn't give up. Remember that. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She had needed this as much as he had. Saving him hadn't just brought him back, it had brought her back, too. In the days that followed, the Navy quietly extended an offer for her to return, even in a mentoring capacity. Rebecca spent long nights staring at the horizon, the old ache in her chest now mingled with something new, hope. She knew she couldn't erase the past, couldn't bring Hawk back, couldn't undo the years she had spent in hiding. But perhaps she didn't need to. Perhaps all she needed was to carry his memory into the skies again, to honor him by doing what she was born to do. One evening, standing by the runway as jets thundered overhead, Rebecca tilted her face to the heavens. The roar of engines no longer broke her, it healed her. She smiled through tears, whispering, I'm Falcon. And I'm home. And to you, dear listener, if Rebecca's story touched your heart, if her courage reminded you that it's never too late to rise again, then take a moment right now. Like this video and subscribe to Kindness Chronicles. Because somewhere out there, another story of resilience is waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss it.